Welcome to eSports Hero Café, where we talk about any and all esports. I'm your host, Bowman Schrodt, and today I have a very special guest with me. I have Tyler Schrodt from from Electronic Gaming Federation. He's the CEO founder. He also has a master's in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial studies from Rochester Institute of Technology, along with a bachelor's in international business and finance. So, Tyler, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. Glad to have you on. Now, your company hosts different tournaments and helps broadcast different tournaments in the esports community. Give me a little bit of background of yourself and your story into esports.
Sure. So my personal background in gaming and esports actually started when I was like a very little kid. I was lucky enough to have parents that didn't think video games were either going to rot your brain or were the product of the devil, as I've come across in my career now. Um, so it kind of afforded me the opportunity to go and explore a bunch of really awesome things. And I ended up as a competitive Counter-Strike player, like when I was 12 years old, I think, back in the heydays of CPL and, that whole world, which is kind of the precursor to where we're at right now. So kind of using that as a backdrop, I ended up going to college and ended up with my degrees and stuff, and it allowed me to get into the entrepreneurship world. And after starting my first company when I was a sophomore, it kind of led into this idea of getting involved in college esports, because everything happening in pro esports has been so incredible to watch and yet so chaotic and full of opportunity that I'm really excited to be a part of it and glad that we can hopefully contribute to the stability and overall credibility.
Nice, nice. What are some of your company's goals?
So the concept of EGF is essentially just kind of this elevation and development of collegiate esports. So we always draw the parallel to traditional sports with esports and see that there's obviously very strong pro scenes in both sides of it. There's very strong collegiate athletics for traditional sports, and the college esports scene is kind of just getting started. So the approach that we took was kind of this understanding that a ton of students all over the place doing this already, and the next step was to deal directly with the administrations and kind of help them get to a level of understanding around the benefits of esports, what it takes to make an esports program work, and how does it feed into the professional industry. So our overall goals are just kind of to add to that level of credibility, stability, and overall, I guess you could say, professionalism of the college industry, and kind of build that career path for students that you see in traditional sports.
Nice, nice. And I know the recent announcement of University of California, Irvine, along with the original college, Robert Morris University, who started offering tuition. With all that, it creates a lot of opportunities for students who are possibly looking into getting to esports. So, what kind of opportunities are these? Can you go into what these colleges are offers and how your company kind of correlates to that?
Sure. Job we go into any college is to essentially help them assess what their students are looking for, what they want to do, and kind of how deep they want to go into college esports. Some of them kind of see it as a club sport. Some of it just see as a student group that they should support on campus through like a student government, and others like UC Irvine and Robert Morris and all the other schools are kind of going all in on this idea of a varsity athletics program. So we essentially provide all the back end infrastructure and support for that to actually happen, and then what the school ends up offering is kind of on them. But our intent is to help them get to whatever point they want to, and then hopefully kind of increase that overall level across the board, both here in North America and kind of everywhere else in the world.
Nice. I know I read in that interview where they talked about the University of California, Irvine, and their program is they were trying to set it up, like as you were saying, as your company's doing, so the way it's a model that other colleges can adapt with over 2,000 accredited colleges throughout the nation. It's a big opportunity there. So
Absolutely.
how do you think we get more colleges on board?
I think a lot of it comes down to just general awareness of what esports are. And like I said, we run into people that think video games are literally the worst thing that's ever happened to society. So a lot of what we do is focused on educational opportunities, and kind of showing that the benefits of esports go beyond just the ability to compete against other teams. We get involved really heavily in the media side of it and work with colleges to produce college degree programs, courses, technical degrees, all sorts of things for colleges that range from super tiny schools that you've never heard of in the middle of nowhere all the way up to huge schools with, 10,000, tens of thousands of students. So I think the path to kind of this mainstream acceptance and getting a lot of colleges on board really comes down to just continuously plugging away at the colleges that are a little bit more forward thinking, using them as really strong examples of what's going on, and then kind of spending a lot of time telling other people about what's going on.
Nice, nice. Now, in these programs, are obviously you want to get players involved to go after becoming a pro player in the college scene and everything like that. But also, what other opportunities are your companies and these colleges helping provide for people who maybe like myself who would want to get into the production side or maybe the journalist side or anything like that?
Yeah, there are so many awesome opportunities with esports because, again, we draw the comparison to traditional sports, but there's even more opportunities because of the nature of esports and kind of how accessible it is to everyone. Because it doesn't require that you spent your entire life in it, and the accessibility from like a physical ability standpoint is even there. So we kind of look at it as this whole industry picture and kind of have this understanding that even at the pro level, there needs to be people that are kind of trained and prepared to take on these newly focused roles. So what we focus on, like I mentioned a lot, is around the media side of it. So whether you want to be a shoutcaster or a writer or a behind the scenes technical producer, graphic designer, like there's so many things that you might be classically trained in, and all it takes is a little bit of retooling to kind of introduce you to what esports does. And then just as in traditional sports, there's opportunities for everything from psychologists to physical trainers to all sorts of things that are now looking at gamers as kind of this new demographic to explore and understand. Because while the physiology of a human is always the same, the stressors on an esports athlete versus a traditional are very different. So there's a little bit of a gap there, but a lot of the focus that we put on educational opportunities are kind of exploring the variety of things that might go into that.
Nice, yeah. No, I did, to the physicality side of it, I did do a video where we looked into Dr. Fobose's 5-year study over in Germany, which was really interesting. So,
Absolutely.
Now, I'm kind of curious about a little bit of a negative side happening with esports, and the most recent example was unfortunately in the College of the Dorms tournament, where Harvard University got kicked out because of cheating. Now, and different developers have different stances on it, and it seems Blizzard's good at communicating about cheating and the stances around it, but other developers, have kind of a lackluster approach for it. Yeah, like, do you think we need, like, almost, especially on the college level, like almost a commissioner type oversight to kind of handle the cheating issue?
I do, and I think it kind of depends, again, on the developer, their approach to it, and the infrastructure that's available to handle these types of cases. Because the challenges you face in esports from like a logistics standpoint vary pretty drastically from traditional sports, because it's much harder to police things. So I think depending on the game, depending on the systems that are available, and the actual locale of the game being played, whether it's in a LAN setting or online, there's a whole bunch of challenges associated with that. But I think a good first step is, whether it's on a case-by-case basis or in a more overarching sort of look at the college esports world, that having consistent rules and sort of a consistency, especially in the transparency aspect of is a huge part of it. Because one of the things that I found the most interesting about the Harvard situation was that Heroes of the Dorm has a big impact in the esports scene. Like, a lot of people know about it, it's very visible. But on the outside of it, the scope of media attention is generally, I would say, relatively limited to like your more traditional headlines in mainstream media. But if you were to Google the Harvard situation with Heroes of the Dorm right now, you find it all over the place on publications that have nothing to do with esports.
Yeah.
And it worries me a little bit on that aspect of it, because there are so many positive things happening in college esports, professional esports, the video game industry in general, but they get eclipsed by negative headlines. So I think for the sake of esports, the developers and independent parties like ESL and like ourselves need to really take a strong stance against that. That it falls on the responsibility of any tournament organizer, any developer to ensure that they're very consistent and transparent in that, and especially when facing the outside world and the mainstream media and all those people that might judge us, because we want to make sure that we're known as a high level of integrity and not as, you know, something that's easily exploitable or something to discount us.
Okay. Now, as the collegiate programs grow, you know, one thing that popped across my mind was, you know, obviously the idea of, you know, pro league feeder programs, kind of like how traditional sports are with colleges. But the other side of that question is, you know, how do those students and how do these programs like yours help promote and market those players and students?
I think that's a really involved process overall, just like you'd find in traditional sports. But the way that we look at it and that we hope that progresses, whether it's with us or someone else, is that kind of like in the investment world, where if you go through an accelerator program or something like that, it kind of gives credence to the ability of the individuals or companies or groups or teams going through that. And I hope that the professional leagues or teams and organizations that are starting to grow now kind of view it in the same lens. And so while the most important aspect of that is kind of like the media coverage and how each tournament organizer provides stats and things like that for the visibility of, you know, students or players, I think it's something that still has a little bit of evolution to go through, because there are still tournament organizers that use spreadsheets and things like that, and kind of provide, or it results in sort of this knowledge gap. So a lot of approaches still go back to things like Twitter and the individual ladders and rankings and stuff like that, and kind of pick their players off of that. So I think eventually it's going to happen where you'll see a very similar system happening. And then obviously there's all the opportunities outside of that, because there are ridiculous amounts of tournaments all over the place to get yourself recognized in.
Yeah. Now, I guess a follow-up question to that would be, you know, currently we have the pro versus amateur status between a college athlete and a pro athlete. Is that something that may need to be considered down the road as well?
I certainly think it's possible. Right now, it's kind of in this status of we are athletes when we want to be, but we take our own privileges, in the sense of we're still kind of on the in-between is how we're perceived from the outside world. And a big part of that is the NCAA has no affiliation with any sort of esports stuff at the moment. So most of the arguments have kind of been constructed by them, and are based on their system. So if you look at what Riot does with you all, TSL or us or anybody else, we sort of exist in parallel to that, but a lot of the rules and regulations that exist for traditional athletes don't yet for esports athletes. So it's definitely something that's going to have to be addressed in some way. Whether or not it follows suit with what the NCAA does with things or not, is still kind of to be determined. There's a ton of litigation going on with the NCAA right now, specifically around those things. So we just really care to understand whether or not that's going to spill over into our world, whether it's going to set a precedent, or whether or not we're going to have to, not that I like using the term, but be a little bit more innovative about how we approach those types of things. So it's something that'll happen over time, and I'm really looking forward to it, because from our perspective, it's a really interesting challenge and an opportunity for us to do something that is kind of on the precipice of learning from what's come before us, and something that's really cool and interesting going into the future.
Yeah. No, I definitely, back when I was playing Unreal Tournament 99 competitively, like my schedule every day was like I'd go to school, I'd go to like sports practice, whether it was football or basketball, track, and then I'd come home and have Unreal practice or a match, and then have to go do homework still. So, you know, it would have been kind of exciting, because like I was in high school at that time. You know, right. And as I was going towards college, that's when I fell off of the competitive gaming side, was because I had college to do. I had all the, you know, all these other responsibilities, and it would have been interesting if like the opportunity you're providing and these colleges are providing was around back then. It was definitely something I would have signed up for.
Yeah, I went through the same experience with Counter-Strike, and that's my freshman and sophomore year of college. I was so buried under being a physics major at the time that the idea of having a life in general was crazy. But I still found time for like LAN parties and things and whatever, because RIT is a huge nerd school, and I loved that about it. But it's really cool that now we're seeing the something of a paradigm shift in the perception of esports and video games, to a point where now colleges, beyond what they're doing at like the scholarship level, are kind of taking a more supportive approach in general on campuses. Like the ones that we go to and we deal with and talk to all the time, they may not quite fully understand why people do it, or why people watch video games, or why they even play video games, but they understand that it's something that their students do, it's something that they want, and it's something that if they want to promote a balance between academics and kind of a social life and their gaming lives, that it's something that you have to open the conversation about, because it's that situation of like, if you shun it, people are going to go do it anyways, and now you've kind of shut off that conversation from happening at all, and that leads to all sorts of problems, from social issues to retention and graduation issues, and all sorts of things that you may not realize at face value.
That's a really good point. It's bringing up the what is it, the snowball effect wow, words for me too now. But that snowball effect of how, or the trickle down effect of how, one something of just like shunning, a community that may be, a huge portion of your college. I think I was reading in the article about University of California Irvine's program, the fact that 72% of their population said they were gamers, but over 80% of the student body said they were in support of esports being actually like college supported. So like even non-gamers were in support of it, which is exciting to see.
Yeah, it's really great that compared to when I was like a kid and playing video games made you like a nerd and an outcast, now it's something where you can be like, yeah, I play video games, like no big deal.
Yeah.
And the stats that you find with UC Irvine's case are actually what you kind of see across the nation. Like the last true like scientifically done survey of colleges in the US said that about 70% of students on any given campus are gamers. That's obviously going to change a little bit depending on the region of the country that you go to, but for overall, it's been so cool to see that evolve. And now people that used to be like, I guess you'd call them closet gamers, are now coming out and saying like, yeah, I play video games and it's awesome, and like, let's go do this on, a weekend or whatever.
Nice. All right. Well, we're almost done. So at the last section of this talk is a little bit what we call our shameless plug section. Anything you want to plug or say or promote?
Well, I guess on behalf of EGF, like if anybody is interested in having a conversation about college esports, definitely hope you any and all conversations, whether you're a college or a company. And I promised Brandon Nolte from Esports Entrepreneur that I would plug the Esports Professionals Network. So if you're interested in the esports world and you're kind of like getting into the business side of it, definitely check out the website, which if I remember correctly, and he'll kill me if I'm wrong, is esportsprofessionals.net.
We'll put it in the description.
All right, that's much easier. But other than that, I just wanted to thank Esports Hero, and congratulations on all the stuff that you guys are up to, and thank you again for having me.
All right, thank you very much. Well, that wraps it up for today's episode. Share, like, and favorite this as you guys see fit, and you all have a wonderful day.